Hey there, sports history fans. We've got some exciting news to share with you. 6 of our podcasts from the Sports History Network have made it to the final round of voting for the prestigious Sports Podcast Awards. Here are their shows and the categories. Historically Speaking Sports and This Day in Sports History are both competing for Best Sports Talk Podcast. No Nonsense Old School Weightlifting History is in the running for Best Fitness, Health, and Wellbeing Podcast. When Football Was Football is up for Best Sports Documentary Podcast. Wrestling with Heels On has entered the ring for Best Wrestling Podcast. And Shoulder Roll Virtual Boxing is fighting for the title for Best Combat Sports Podcast. Now, of course, we need your help to take home the championship for each of these awesome shows. All you gotta do is head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/vote. Cast your vote for your favorite shows, or better yet, all 6 of them. Again, every vote counts, and we got to show the world how much sports history really matters. So thank you for your support and making Sports History Network the headquarters for sports yesteryear. But again, don't wait. You got to go vote now. That's over at sportshistorynetwork.com/vote.
Hello, this is Ross Bliley from the podcast Pigskin Tales. This podcast is sponsored by Sterling Soap Company. With products sold throughout 41 locations around the globe, Sterling Soap Company has a unique assortment of products to choose from for your loved one for the holidays. Handmade artisan soaps created by Roderick and Amanda Lovin since 2012, these products are affordable and provide great value. Act now and save on your shipping costs. If you purchase $75 or more, your shipping cost is free in the United States. Shop now online at sterlingsoap.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. Today, we will continue with part 2 of the 1980 Philadelphia Eagles. In a Week 9 game against the Seattle Seahawks, the game plan for both teams was to throw the ball. Seattle quarterback Jim Zorn threw 35 times for 250 yards. Ron Jaworski threw 30 times for 253 yards. Receiver Charlie Smith had a big game with 5 receptions for 109 yards and 1 touchdown. The final score was Eagles 27, Seahawks 20. For the second week in a row, the passing game reigned supreme. The Saints threw the ball 48 times for 370 yards, but were held to 3 touchdowns. With running back Wilbert Montgomery still out of the lineup with an injury, Jaworski threw the ball 32 times for 323 yards and 3 touchdowns. Charlie Smith had another great game, catching 9 passes for 137 yards. The Eagles cruised to a 34-21 win. The Eagles played a fairly conservative game on offense in a Week 11 game against the Washington Redskins, but their defense played perhaps their best game of the season. They held Washington to 13 first downs and only 218 yards. They also forced 5 turnovers, including a fumble in which linebacker Jerry Robinson returned 59 yards for a touchdown. The final score was Philadelphia 24, Washington 0. The winning continued the following week against the 8-3 Oakland Raiders in an old-fashioned defensive battle. The Eagles held a 3-0 lead after 3 quarters, but the Raiders struck lightning in the 4th quarter when Jim Plunkett connected with Cliff Branch for an 86-yard touchdown. But later in the quarter, Wilbert Montgomery scored on a 3-yard touchdown to give the Eagles a 10-7 victory. The Eagles' offense managed only 181 total yards, but their defense allowed only 237 yards, forced 3 turnovers, and sacked Jim Plunkett 8 times. With the win against Oakland, the Eagles improved their record to 11-1, but the Cowboys were right on their heels at 10-3. The two teams would meet in the final game of the season. A loss to the Chargers in Week 13 would make things much tighter. San Diego led 19-0 at halftime, but the Eagles came storming back in the second half, scoring 3 touchdowns. But it wasn't enough, as the Chargers added a field goal to win 22-21. Jaworski played a good game, completing 20 of 31 passes for 201 yards with 2 touchdowns. Wilbert Montgomery fully recovered from his injury, gained 61 yards rushing and 78 yards receiving, and scored 2 touchdowns. But the Eagles' defense couldn't stop the Chargers' potent passing attack. Quarterback Dan Fouts passed for 342 yards, and receiver John Jefferson caught 8 passes for 164 yards. The Eagles would now play the 10-3 Atlanta Falcons. With only a 1-game lead on the Cowboys, this was an important game. With the score tied 17-17 in the fourth quarter, the Falcons kicked the game-winning field goal. The Eagles couldn't establish a running game, and Ron Jaworski didn't have one of his better days, completing only 16 of 35 passes for 207 yards while throwing 2 interceptions. The Eagles' defense had a tough time stopping the running combo of William Andrews and Lynn Kane, who combined for 173 yards on 27 carries. The Cowboys defeated the Raiders 19-13. 2 weeks earlier, Eagle fans had high hopes for winning their first championship since 1960. Now they weren't feeling nearly as confident. The Week 15 game against the Cardinals was a must-win. Offensively, Charlie Smith had a big game, catching 7 passes for 134 yards. Defensively, they completely shut down the Cardinals. Otis Anderson, who had run all over the Eagles earlier in the season, was held to 39 yards on 17 carries. The Cardinals had only 8 first downs and 126 total yards. One day after the Eagles defeated the Cardinals, the Cowboys lost to the Rams on Monday Night Football. The final game of the regular season was played on December 21st on a cold day at Texas Stadium. To win the division title, the Cowboys needed to beat the Eagles by at least 25 points, and they were doing just that, leading 35-10 in the fourth quarter. But the Eagles scored 17 unanswered points and won the division while losing the game 35-27. Other than a 25-yard run by Wilbert Montgomery, the Cowboys shut down the Eagles' running game, but they couldn't stop their passing attack. Jaworski completed 18 of 30 passes for 331 yards and 1 touchdown. But there was cause for concern defensively, as Cowboys quarterback Danny White connected on 16 of 24 passes and threw 4 touchdowns. Receiver Tony Hill caught 4 passes for 110 yards. Ron Jaworski, Harold Carmichael, and nose tackle Charlie Johnson made the Pro Bowl. Johnson also made All-Pro. The Eagles' opponent in the playoff game would be the Vikings. Minnesota went into this game with an unimpressive 9-7 record and had been soundly defeated by the Eagles earlier in the season. Still, the Eagles' confidence was slightly shaky after losing 3 of their last 4 games. The Vikings jumped out to a 14-0 lead before the Eagles knew what hit them. But they scored 2 touchdowns to tie the score 14-14. The Vikings regained the lead when they tackled Jaworski in the end zone. But the Eagles scored 17 unanswered points for a 31-16 win. The Eagles' defense played extremely well, allowing only 215 total yards. The Eagles were only 1 win away from playing in their first Super Bowl, but their opponent would be the 14-4 Dallas Cowboys, who had just defeated the Eagles handily 2 weeks prior. The game was played at Veterans Stadium with a wind chill factor of -3 degrees. The Eagles struck first when Wilbert Montgomery ran for a 42-yard touchdown, but the Cowboys tied the score. The halftime score was 7-7. The second half belonged to the Eagles, who scored 13 unanswered points for a 20-7 victory. Wilbert Montgomery carried the ball 26 times for 194 yards. The Eagles' defense played exceptionally well, allowing the Cowboys only 11 first downs and 206 total yards while forcing 4 turnovers. Now it was on to the Super Bowl to face the Oakland Raiders, whom they had beaten in Week 12. Most people predicted an Eagles victory. Things didn't start well for Philadelphia. The Raiders took a 7-0 lead before running back Kenny King turned a short pass reception into an 80-yard touchdown. The Eagles could only manage a field goal and trailed 14-3 at halftime. But the Eagles had been through this before during the season and always came back. Hope faded when Jim Plunkett connected with Cliff Branch for a 29-yard touchdown. The Raiders added a field goal to take a 24-3 lead with only 1 quarter left. The Eagles scored a touchdown in the 4th quarter, but it was too little, too late. The final score was Oakland 27, Philadelphia 10. The Eagles were not dominated statistically speaking, gaining 360 yards to the Raiders' 377, but they turned the ball over 4 times compared to 0 turnovers for the Raiders. It was a disappointing end to a great season, but Eagles fans could take solace in the team's winning its first championship in 20 years. The Eagles would not see the Super Bowl again until 2004, losing to the Patriots 24-21. In 2017, the Eagles finally won the Vince Lombardi Trophy, defeating the Patriots 41-33. That will conclude our podcast for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.